Folks, it's been a couple of weeks since the last Buckeye Sports Breakdown episode, so I would like to give you an update. I'm officially a full-time resident of Arizona, living right here in Phoenix. But my roots to Ohio have never decreased, and it never will decrease. With that, it's back to the Reds, the Guardians, the Columbus Crew, and FC Cincinnati. A lot of talking points for both of those, or rather, all four of those teams as they get towards the end of the season, the Reds and Guardians, talking about their fall from power in their respective divisions and how they get back going into next week. And for FC Cincinnati and the Columbus Crew, we give them a little preview on what to expect in Leagues Cup as their campaign starts off on Sunday. Hello everyone, I'm Mahir Sinhasan and welcome back to another episode, another edition on this podcast for teams from the great state of Ohio. Not too much of a wrap-up other than what I just said, so let's get to it, and we start off with a bunch of quick hits, starting off in Cleveland, where the Cavs won the Summer League in Las Vegas. Isaiah Mobley won MVP. Again, this was earlier in the week, I believe on Monday or Tuesday, but respect to the Cavs, especially for a team that's starting to get their bearings. They've got Donovan Mitchell as their number one man, but they need to try to build forward. Again, not too much for Summer League, and similar to how it is with spring training and NFL, it doesn't really matter, but that's a pretty good response from what we saw in Vegas. We'll stay in Cleveland next, and the Browns have released their alternate helmets for this upcoming season, which will also include an alternate jersey. You have the white top helmet, including a white out jersey. You still have the usual orange stripes on the side, and there will be an orange stripe through the center of the helmet. Should be pretty good overall. And it's a throwback look to the original Browns look that goes back to the 40s and 50s. In terms of the alternate uniform, it will make 3 appearances this year. Week 2 on the road against the Steelers on Monday Night Football. Week 6 at home against the 49ers. And Week 17 versus the Jets will be on Thursday Night Football. Maybe there's a chance we see a whiteout in that Jets game, and that too. It's late in the season. Whiteout paired with snow could make for an interesting day in Cleveland. All right, so done with the quick hits and on to the Reds, who, again, going into the All-Star break, had control of the NL Central. They now sit 2.5 games behind the Brewers, who they were swept by in the series right after the All-Star break. And then they split the series against the Giants, taking the last 2. Again, a lot of great moments for the Reds during this time point. Tyler Stevenson and Spencer Steer were able to break their hitting drought. Joey Votto got his 350th career home run. Andrew Abbott had 8 innings pitched yesterday and only 1 hit allowed in his outing. And then Christian Encarnacion Strand made his major league debut. We'll start off with my thoughts on CES first. And again, when I look at the guys who made their debut, you look at Christian Encarnacion Strand, Matt McLain, Elly De La Cruz, Encarnacion Strand, and this may be an unpopular opinion, might actually be third. McLain, of course, goes out with a double on a pretty easy grounder, too. I mean, nobody expected him to get double. And then Elly De La Cruz, of course, does a pretty solid outing in his debut. The day after that, he responds with a monster shot home run. Christian Encarnacion Strand did the same, too, as he hammered it 428. But nonetheless, very solid showing in his first series in his big league career. Solid overall. Shows he could be a long-time player in this team, which could also include being the first baseman, which we could see the stretch there. Again, he's been playing well at the plate, 308 batting average, 4 for 13. I also like the way he's just built as a baseball player. You look at guys like Joey Votto, and even maybe some guys out in the field like Jonathan India, Matt McLain, they're a little slimmer. Christian Encarnacion Strand seems like he has that physicality to be a first baseman, right? He's got the physicality to chase balls. He's got the physicality to challenge balls in that area, to get the base hits where it matters the most. And he's got a chance to really be a key asset in this team. Now, again, similar to Elly, where there was a lot of flash in that first week he was in the big leagues. The question is for CES is from now until the end of the season, can he show he can improve in those big moments and truly show that he can be in the starting 9? I think he certainly can. And a lot of people would agree with me. Again, looking elsewhere, pitching. Pitching has been a little bit concerning. And again, it's not necessarily Alexis Diaz's fault, and he's had a fantastic year. In my opinion, he's been the best closer in the National League this year. But at the same time, pitching has come into question, whether that be Alex Young, um, Cruz for a while. The same goes for Lucas Sims, Buck Farmer. The guys down the stretch have been playing a little bit off recently, and it's not what you want to see, especially down the stretch, especially going into the playoffs. And now, especially since the Reds have to play catch up on the Brewers in what could be a big series. And you think about what this pitching crew could look like. Again, some of it goes to those relief guys. Some of it goes to the starters too. I mean, the fact that Nick Lodolo is out and Hunter Green is still out too. I mean, he was put on IL in late June, right before the Braves series, and he has yet to play for a while. It's been a rough year for Hunter Green, despite getting a $100 million 6-year contract. Elsewhere, you think about it, it's a little rough. It's a little rough, and I think the question is for the Reds, do they need to get like a true starting pitcher? I mean, you think about guys I would be comfortable starting in a playoff game. Graham Ashcraft is one, especially in his recent form. And I think another guy is Andrew Abbott, a great rookie overall, a great rookie who's been really showing up his work throughout this entire year. So you have Abbott overall doing a pretty good job. And again, I talked about Ladola, and it even goes for the field players as well on who to trade. I'm still sticking with my gut, and I talked about this before that, in my opinion, the Reds should trade Nick Senzel. Not getting too many starts. He's getting over $2 million in salary. Most of the guys are at the base salary of around 700,000. So Chatterbox Sports talked about this yesterday, and it was basically the fact of, is the hate Jonathan India getting warranted? And again, they had a really good conversation. Tom Brenneman chimed in along with a lot of the other co-hosts, and here's what they had to say.
The vitriol he has for doing nothing wrong.
You talking about India?
Yeah.
Reed's comparison to Andy Dalton was fantastic. Serviceable guy, gets the job done, and for some reason, everybody's out on him.
Andy Dalton also couldn't win a playoff game. I think there's difference, right?
Oh, but yeah, you're right. You're right on that. But he got there.
Andy Dalton crumbled. Andy Dalton crumbled in every big moment he ever had.
Jonathan India is like 2020 AJ Green. We just have better and younger behind him.
I agree. I agree with that.
Good analogy.
I'm just saying the fan base wanted his head in week 4 of this season. Week 4. And they have called for it ever since. It's probably not great for the mindset of a player. It's probably not great to be hearing that behind closed doors. I know it's a business. But guess what? These guys are human beings. They're people, and they see their fan base turn against them. The front office is talking about trading him. It probably is not great for the mental well-being of a player trying to get out of a slump. I'd say that. That would be my argument to that.
And at the end of the day, you're hitting 197 over 30 games. I don't really care who you are. You're going to get a lot of hate in the city.
Correct.
It doesn't matter.
And it's a fair point.
And it doesn't help that he's abysmal in the field.
And I've turned around on this too. I've joined the committee. I've joined the trade Jonathan India committee. He has no spot with Strand here. He's not going to have a spot when Noelvi's here.
Now, overall, when I look at how Jonathan India was doing, again, they compared Jonathan India to Andy Dalton. He's been doing solid. And I think like some of the hate he's getting is not that warranted. He shouldn't get that hate. You think about it. He's leading the team in hits. He's leading the team in home runs. He's leading the team in at-bats. He's been, I think, the closest thing to a captain, you think about in soccer terms, a captain the Reds have had this year. But being the captain comes with a certain type of responsibility. And I think when you look at how India's getting criticized, I think he does need to take some of that responsibility because he needs to be trustworthy. I think when you look at a guy like Andy Dalton, right? Yes, he didn't do well in the fourth quarter when the moment mattered, or even in the second half when you would throw interceptions. But I think Jonathan India, in ways, you can tell there are doubts, right? When a pitcher is going down and away on India, he strikes out, right? He doesn't wait. It could be a ball or it could be fouled off. He always strikes out. There's a way he could change it, but it always happens. That's the one pitch that gets a lot of Reds players, but India especially. And that's one where I keep on thinking to myself, he's got to do better in those certain moments where it matters to really be true. I think the other thing with Andy Dalton, and I think this is probably why it should not be warranted in favor of India, is that when Andy Dalton sucks, everybody on the offense takes responsibility. Because here's the thing. If Andy Dalton throws an interception, AJ Green doesn't get a catch, and whoever it was back then, Tyler Boyd, Marvin Jones, Mohamed Sanu, they don't get a catch either. Now, you could always hand it off to the running back, but the Bengals historically and most NFL teams are very pass heavy. Take, for example, baseball. Now, when you look at teams that want to go to the playoffs, you want to have a team where you are putting the best 9 out there. And maybe there is an argument where you could say Jonathan India is maybe not one of the best 9, but he's not one of the best infielders, especially when you have an infield including Elly De La Cruz, Spencer Steer, Matt McLain. Other times, maybe Nick Senzel slides in. Who else? Kevin Newman has played that spot. Jose Barrero. A lot of great guys overall for the Reds who have played that spot. Not to mention Joey Votto. And at the same time, you have that question in the back of your head saying, is Jonathan India a top 4 infielder, where you can say to yourself, is he going to be the guy that helps in the playoffs? Not just to be a leader of the team, but to be a leader of the group in terms of results. And that's my biggest question is, can India do that down the stretch? Can the Reds do that down the stretch? I mean, I talk about this week in, week out, and it seems like every week in July seems like a big week for this team. But I will say it's another big week. It is. The Arizona Diamondbacks come to town this weekend, and then on the weekday series, they're back up in Milwaukee taking on the Brewers. Both of them will be 3-game series. For the Diamondbacks, it's interesting. And again, I think some of it comes from living in Phoenix, going to ASU, but I feel for the Diamondbacks. They're very much like the Reds, where in the sense that they have had so many years of turmoil and basically crappy teams. And now the teams are starting to play well. They're starting to take the division, but those big guns, Dodgers in the NL West, the Brewers in the NL Central, are starting to come back and regain the throne. So now you have 2 teams that are not just fighting each other, could be fighting each other for a wild card spot later this year, for all you know. And now they're starting to go forward and maybe try to rebound. D-backs did a pretty good job against the Braves. They actually took the series over there in Atlanta, so kudos to them. And again, it would be nice if either team could win. But I think from what it seems like for a Reds perspective, they need to rely on the offense. And I think going off the point I made with India and the offense, who to trade leading up towards July 31st, this is a big moment. This and the Brewers series, because I don't think actually more the Diamondback series than the Brewers, because the Brewers series, you have Ashcraft and you have Abbott on the mound. And on the other side, here are your pitchers for the Reds, by the way, Lively, Weaver, and Williamson. Pretty mid pitchers overall, in my opinion. And then for Arizona, they have gotten nothing, actually. You've got Henry starting, Tyler Henry, that is, starting tonight in Great American Ballpark. They do not have a pitcher announced for Saturday and Sunday, the D-backs. I think that's insane. Neither do the Reds have it, but still. And again, the D-backs have their big guys on the mound. I think more importantly, Zach Gallen. But Zach Gallen, Pat pitched earlier in the week against the Braves, actually had a perfect game going for a little while. So maybe this is the weekend where the Reds see who to trade or to keep. And I would full-heartedly agree, Now, the Brewers on the other side. And I think that too, the Brewers have an interesting weekend as well. They host the Braves, and then they will host the Reds during the weekday. Ashcraft will be on the mound Monday, Abbott on Tuesday, as I said earlier. I think the biggest question is not really for Ashcraft, although he struggled on the road as well. It's more for Abbott. And again, Abbott's a great pitcher, and sometimes you can say to yourself, oh, he has some bad outings. It happened the last time the Reds were in Milwaukee, as they lost that day on July 7th. The same thing I say for Ashcraft, I say for Abbott. It's basically remain consistent and understand you have the command. And I think Abbott understands that at home because he understands the crowds behind him. Now, that obviously does not happen on the road, but he has to have that same mindset inside himself to push himself forward. And I think that's one thing of being a rookie, is where you can say, yes, you've got the home crowd, but now you've got to face a crowd that's cheering for the other team, cheering against you. How do you respond in that moment, and how do you go forward? And more importantly, you just need more pizzazz, both on the mound and I think especially in that offense too. They showed it. I mean, they lost, but 11-10 to the Giants. They show the runs later. At least the defense also helped as well. I mean, it was kind of a two tandem work there. For all you know, pretty big week for the Reds. All right, up the I-71 we go, and it's time to talk about the Guardians. 2 games behind the Twins. They also fell from power in their respective division. That is the AL Central. As they went 2-4 this week, they got swept on the road versus the Rangers and then beat the Pirates 2-1. And again, this team got in a little bit of trouble this past week in terms of coughing up leads. And that's something that, one, we have not seen much from the Guardians, and two, has been pretty plaguing, especially from this past week. Take, for example, against the Rangers this past Friday. They were up 4-0, ended up losing 12-4. And even against the Pirates a couple days ago, up 4-0 in the 7th inning, mind you, ended up losing 7-5 off a 5-run 7th. It just seems lapses overall. Sometimes you just have a bad pitcher. Maybe he has a bad stint and it ends up crumbling as it is. And then in terms of the Rangers game this past Friday, it was the entire game, which was a whole crumbling of sorts. I would say from the case of the Guardians, I take the benefit of the doubt because the Rangers might end up being the first seed because, yes, the Rays for most of the year have had the best record in baseball, at least the best record in the AL. That was up until yesterday when the Orioles took control of the AL East. You could see the Rangers slide into the number 1 spot. You could see something else. Maybe the Astros take it. For all you know, it's a toss-up. Either way, the Rangers are most likely going to the playoffs. As for the Pirates, solid team overall. They could have a chance going to the playoffs, but I don't know. Nonetheless, the Guardians won 11-0 and 10-1 earlier in the week. So even with that loss, they still showed dominance, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing, especially against a team like the Pirates. The Twins also played well, too. They swept the A's, and they split their series on the road against Seattle. There could be an eye-for-eye battle. I actually think there will be an eye-for-eye battle later this year when it comes to the division. Could come down to a game 163. Taking a look at the stats, we had Josh Naylor with 2 home runs on Thursday, managed RBIs in both starts Monday and Tuesday, and he pinch hit on Wednesday. Josh Bell with 2 home runs and RBI singles during the series. This team knows how to swing momentum. And again, I don't give too many credit to the Guardians players because I don't watch the Guardians as much as I do for the Reds. But at the same time, when you look at Josh Naylor, who's leading the team in RBIs and home runs, Josh Bell, too, having a revelation unto himself ever since leaving Washington and then going to San Diego last year, he's really showing that the Guardians can be a playoff caliber team down the stretch. And again, I should have mentioned this earlier, is that the Guardians are 6.5 games behind the last wildcard spot. That's a lot. In other words, if they're going to the playoffs, they are going as the AL Central champions. The Reds, on the other hand, are only a game behind the NL wildcard race, so they could still get in as a wildcard even if they end out losing the NL Central. But it would help to, at the very least, host a playoff game, and who knows, could get a bye. Back to the Guardians, they're back home this weekend, facing the Phillies, who just faced the Brewers at home, ended up losing to the Brewers 1-2. And many people last year, including myself, wanted this to be the World Series. The Phillies were the underdogs. They were hurtling all around. The Guardians, too, were playing really well against the Yankees, ended up losing in Game 5. Just 2 teams that I think it shows what these teams can do when they're not old money, right? I talked about this concept a few weeks back when the Reds played the Orioles, where there's the old money and the new money. And the old money are teams like the Yankees, the Dodgers. I think at this point you can call the Astros old money as well. These are teams that will be historically good. Historically, they're going to be in the running for a World Series. And then you have the new money teams that we're seeing, which included the Guardians last year, who haven't been that perennial since 2016 when they played in the World Series. Philly, who hadn't made it to the World Series since 2008 when they ended up winning. To name a few other new money teams, as I call it, the Padres could also be new money, although they've also struggled this year. The Reds, new money. D-backs, new money. In the AL, Orioles, I mean, holy smokes, what a story that would be if the Orioles end up winning the AL East. Just so many great stories overall from these new money teams. And I think the Guardians and the Phillies were those teams last year. Again, their luster has died off a little bit, and now it's a chance of just trying to sustain that type of play But at the same time, I love what the series is doing. And I think more importantly, the Phillies are giving off a vibe that is very similar to their World Series run last year. They may not come in as the favorites, but they have the type of contention to be the favorites. And it feels like they could be bringing that type of energy to Progressive Field this weekend. So for the Guardians, that's where you turn to your stalwarts like Josh Naylor, like Josh Bell, who both had really great series against Pittsburgh to try to face the other Pennsylvania team with that type of caliber. Let's take a look at the pitchers for the weekend. You got Gavin Williams on the mound, Tanner Bybee up on Saturday, no pitcher on Sunday as of now. And then they've got the Royals at home. Allen will be up in the on the mound on that day on Monday, I believe. Cy Vale on Tuesday, and Williams will get a second start of this upcoming stint on Wednesday. Gavin Williams, of course, the big guys I mentioned, started on Saturday versus the Rangers. 4 innings pitched, 4 hits, but he did have 2 earned runs, which eventually led to a 2-0 loss for the Guardians. Still trying to keep that caliber up, still trying to show that they could be running in the AL Central. Speaking of which, the Twins, a little bit of a rough schedule this week, so the Guardians with a chance to maybe close down and who knows, take the lead in the AL Central come next week. So onto the pitch now, and it's time to talk about Leagues Cup. Yes, not MLS, Leagues Cup. We're not going to hear about MLS play for quite a while, in fact, a month because of this tournament. I should tell you about what it is first, and FC Cincinnati and Columbus Crew are both a part of it as well. It has been going on for a few years now. First as a tournament with about 8 to 12 teams, and then it started as showcases, which was the case last year. And this year, it features all teams in MLS and Liga MX, the official league of Mexico. There are 47 teams in this tournament, 2 league winners. That is, I forget the Liga MX team, my apologies. And LAFC, the MLS Cup winner from last year, they get a bye from a round-robin group stage, and the top 2 of 3 teams in that group will go to the knockout stage. All matches will be played at MLS stadiums, and if there is a match between 2 Liga MX teams, a host site will be coordinated. So let's take a look at FC Cincinnati and Columbus Crew and who they will be playing in this year's Leagues Cup. FC Cincinnati hosted Chivas Guadalajara in the Leagues Cup showcase last year. They will host them again this Sunday as they start off their 2023 Leagues Cup campaign, and their second match will be hosting Sporting Kansas City on Thursday. Columbus Crew, on the other hand, will host St. Louis SC on Sunday, and their next game will be the final match of their Central 1 group against Club America on July 31st. So when we talk next week, hopefully we'll have an episode next week. FC Cincinnati's fate, or at least part of their fate, will be determined the next time we talk, and then Columbus Crew will still have 1 match to go. On to FC Cincinnati first. And the Orange and Blue, after probably weeks of just hobbling through the season, you're hoping that Matt Miazga, Brandon Vasquez are hopefully coming back. Well, they do, because thanks to U.S. losing to Panama on penalty kicks in the Gold Cup semifinals, they were both starting that match against Nashville this past Saturday. Aaron Bupenza also made an appearance off the bench and ended up getting the capper deep in stoppage time. Beautiful win. 3-1 win over Nashville. Again, another stalwart in the Eastern Conference. More importantly, those 3 guys that I just mentioned take the load off Lucho Acosta, who's really been the only superstar that's been with this team, along with Alvaro Barrial, but Acosta with more of a central role and a more productive, animated role throughout the middle. And they need to keep that up, especially with how both teams are starting to shape out this year. And I think especially with how FC Cincinnati is starting to play. When you think about it, just down the stretch, and I think because of how USL, in other news, USL may be going to a pro-rel system, that is promotion relegation, which is very similar to how European football works. I thought about FC Cincinnati's season. I thought, well, here's the thing. MLS Cup playoffs are happening. In any other year, if this was Europe, FC Cincinnati is running away with the trophy. But you have the MLS Cup playoffs, meaning FC Cincinnati has a few more games to win until they could take the MLS Cup. Back to the present day, though. You look at how this team is shaping up, and especially how Liga MX is shaping up as well. Just to put in perspective, their season, Liga MX, started, or rather, it's about 3 matches in. And again, you're taking an entire month-long break. That's about 4 to 5 match days, maybe more in some parts of the season. And you're taking it away. You're taking it into this different competition. Now, granted, you do play some teams that are outside. I think more for Liga MX, they're going to be playing MLS teams more than MLS teams playing Liga MX sides. But at the same time, it's kind of pretty cool. And at the same time, I should say, with MLS, you'll have more MLS versus MLS matchups than Liga MX versus Liga MX matchups. Nonetheless, back to the present day, Pat Noonan, head coach of FC Cincinnati, he definitely wants to win this type of game, this type of tournament, this FC Cincinnati culture. And again, some squads and a lot of fans have questioned, will these teams take it seriously? Take, for example, that showcase last year when FC Cincinnati hosted Chivas Guadalajara. That ended up being like more of a B team matchup for both sides. FC Cincinnati won 3-1, but at the same time, it just didn't seem right. You know, you had a half empty stadium, you had a B team going. It was almost there because it was just there, right? Obviously, this one has a much more bigger impact as well, as the top 3 teams of this tournament advance to the CONCACAF Champions League, which is kind of North America's version of Europe's big tournament of the same name, Champions League, that is. They want to get at this. And I think FC Cincinnati should get at it. You know, you have guys like Boupendza back. I hope he makes a start during this. The only question is, obviously, you're going to be playing 2 matches in 5 days, so you're going to have to regulate minutes, but that's been pretty common of Pat Noonan and crew this year. Taking a look at FC Cincinnati's opponents, you got Chivas Guadalajara. Not too much information I found on them, but this year they've been the only team in Liga MX to start off with 3 wins. So it's almost, I mean, who knows, especially if Chivas ends up winning Apertura, you're going to have the Supporter Shield winner, right? Well, pardon me, don't count the chickens before they hatch. The Supporter Shield leader in MLS against Chivas Guadalajara, the leader in MX. That's a pretty good rivalry. I actually kind of like that. Could be a precursor to Campeones Cup, but like I said, the chickens have not hatched yet. You never know. SKC, on the other hand, Sporting Kansas City, again, a team that's been, in terms of MLS, towards the bottom of the table. But they started to get their bearings, only the 3rd meeting between the 2 sides. They lost in 2020. They drew in 2019. That is the orange and blue against Sporting Kansas City. And the team started to flourish. That is SKC, with Johnny Russell starting to open up, get some chances. And especially with Alan Pulido, their star number 9, starting to get back from injury. However, they did lose to Austin 2-1 on the road this past weekend. After getting 3 matches of results, though, my biggest question is, look at the midfield, though. You got Tommy, you've got Remy Walter there. Sometimes you have some other players, Radoja, who's been a very common 6 right now with SKC and has played historically over in Europe as well. Full of just some great homegrown talent. And that's been Sporting Kansas City's culture for the longest time, ever since Peter Vermes took over that squad in 2009. Should be a nice, good matchup in terms of the Midwest teams. And for you never know, FC Cincinnati could be the toppers of that group in what should be an interesting Leagues Cup. So up the I-71 we go once again, this time to Columbus Crew. They lost 3-2 on the road versus Portland. And again, you can talk about how this is a great offense. The defense doesn't struggle, and I've kind of reiterated that throughout the weeks and throughout the episodes. But it's tough to go on the road and get a result, especially if you're an East Coast team going to the West Coast. I actually think it's tougher if you're an East Coast team going to the West Coast than it is if you're a West Coast team going to the East Coast. I don't know why, but historically, it just seems to match out that way. And they've just historically struggled in that part of the country, Columbus Crew. I don't know when's the last time they've gotten a result there, maybe a win. It's been a while. It hasn't happened this year. It hasn't happened this past year as well. So should be interesting. And now maybe you get the sirens blaring a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit. They are winless in the last 3. So Columbus with a chance to maybe straighten themselves out, much like FC Cincinnati, they will be hosting. And that, of course, was decided off the seeding based off last year in the playoffs, if you are wondering. Meanwhile, St. Louis City SC beat Miami 3-0 at home. They will be playing Columbus on Sunday. and that one will be at lower.com field. Back to St. Louis SC. Their last game was against Inter Miami, a 3-0 victory. And of course, it was Inter Miami's last game before Lionel Messi would make his debut, or rather, depending on when you're watching this, when he will make his debut, which will be Friday night, or when he would make his debut Friday night. Columbus and the fans, I keep on saying this, and I think this is more the case for Columbus when they play these big matchups. I think especially back to that Nashville contest a little while ago, their fans need to show out. I think about St. Louis's key players, especially one of their first signings in Roman Bürki. He's known for playing in big environments. I mean, he was the starting goalkeeper for Borussia Dortmund, an absolute stalwart of a club in the Bundesliga in Germany. At the same time, though, there have been some times where if the offense gets energy, if the crowd gets energy, we saw this in Colorado, we saw this in Nashville earlier this year. When the crowd gets energy, Roman Bürki and crew starts to go a little sideways. And I think if Columbus, if their city can buy into these games, especially that first match on Sunday, I think Columbus has a chance of getting a result against St. Louis. It does make for an interesting matchup against Club America, who has been a very good stalwart in Liga MX, has won some titles here and there throughout the past few years. I think to compare Club America, I think they've been like the LA Galaxy, not the LA Galaxy like what we've seen the past couple of years, like LA Galaxy in 2010s, right? When they had David Beckham, Landon Donovan. Even after those two left, you still had a great Robbie Keane up top, right? A team that could still be competitive. Robbie Keane, Zlatan Ibrahimovic, when he was there with the club for a couple of years. So many great guys in that team, and Club America is just the same way. Columbus with a great opportunity to show what they've got to both themselves, to both Liga MX. And I think that too, you got an MLS matchup to start off. So it does ease in a little bit to some extent. It is an ease in on what this team can do. So that's it for Buckeye Sports Breakdown. Again, talking Leagues Cup with FC Cincinnati and Columbus Crew as they venture against their fellow MLS squads and against teams south of the border. And we also talked about the Reds and the Guardians, although falling from power in their division, how they can get back to the top. I'm Mahirson Hassan, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of Buckeye Sports Breakdown. Stay safe, everyone, and I will see you next week.